please. Dr. Tom Kariuki, how can science funding leaders move beyond simply collecting demographic data to implementing structural reforms that genuinely address systemic biases in peer review and grant awarding processes? For example, what do you see as the role of co-creation and directed funding in providing long-term commitments while maintaining a fair funder-awardee ecosystem? The floor is yours, please.
Thank you. It's a very long question, so I'm not quite sure where to start with it, because that could be a seminar or a workshop that one can build around. First of all, congratulations, Dr. Abdul and the entire team here at icipe. I think it's a very great moment. And then personally, I think I want to congratulate you because you've only been in the office for 1 year only, and here we are launching a strategy. So many, many congratulations for that. Yes, you've asked me to talk a little bit about money. First of all, let me declare that it's not about my own money. I don't have much. But I think what you want me to focus on is how funding organizations really supporting institutions and supporting the people who do the research. Our organization, SFA Africa Foundation, is just like many other organizations that are sitting here and attending this meeting. I think there are fundamental questions we always ask ourselves, and I think it's something we should be asking ourselves every day. Why do we exist when it comes to these conversations around science, research, and innovation? And I think if we keep that in the context and within all the content we generate, I think it becomes very, very easy to then ask other questions. So we exist, in my view, is because we want to focus on the priorities for the continent. What are those priorities right now? Whether it is climate and environment, whether it is health, whether it is food. Those are priorities for the continent. And that is already put into the STISA 2035. Every institution here probably has its own strategy that speaks to the same thing. I know earlier you speak a lot about this. So the question there is, what are the questions that you are trying to address? What are the gaps that can be solvable through R&D approaches? Not every problem can be solved through R&D, but I think we need to focus on that. Well, that gets to the second step in all of this. How do we design the programs that actually we have across the continent? Are those programs or designs that are imported, or actually are we creating them here? Because then they must be locally contexted, like you have said, Wajiro, about all of this. So that's a question. It's about strategies and systems and all of the other aspects that we need to put together, including the structure of how we actually support and fund. And then the third area for us is, of course, it's about money. Nothing moves without money. Whether it is other people's money or money from, so whatever the sources we get from, we need it, and we need it now, even as we think about where we should be getting more from. So the question is always about what kind of money do we need to be transformative about what we want to deliver on the continent? Is it a few $1 million? Is it billions of dollars? Where should it coming from? That's a question, and it's a conversation for every day. And for us, one of the biggest challenges we also have is the question around oversight. Oversight is about assurance to those who then step up to provide support. It's about accountability. Accountability is not just those who actually provide funding, it's also about those ones who are our downstream partners. Institutions like icipe have done great jobs, otherwise they would not have survived for 40 years. So they are doing many great things here that is actually could be a template for a lot of institutions to learn from about how to be resilient. I'm sure there are ups and downs for icipe, how to maintain partnerships. Once we figure that out, then it becomes the other big question for all of us. What are the impact areas? What do we want to see impacting in Africa? For me, the first thing is people. It's about people, and people is about the kind of training that icipe has done for, again, 40 years. Generating and leadership development has been at the center of this, and I think all of us as organizations are focused on people. Are focused on places of work. This is a beautiful campus. A lot of great science goes on here. I know a lot about icipe because I had the pleasure also as a very young scientist meeting TRO somewhere in Chiromo. He did not teach me, But I went to one of his lectures, and who was asking all of us as young scientists who is aspiring, what kind of insect do you want to study? Do you want to study about those ones that crow, or those ones that fly? Or those, always that stuck with my mind. Then the other third area, of course, is policies. Money comes to places where policies are actually in place for that to happen. And that means, for example, we all talk about engaging the private sector. The private sector have a very risk aspect to all of this. They will not invest if they feel that everything is, the policies are not there. So we need to think always about de-risking investment from all sources. Then there are products. One of the, in my view, one of the weaknesses about what we try to do in Africa is we can do quite a good work on the discovery sciences, but we have been very poor at transitioning that discoveries to the marketplace, to commercialization, to make sure that agri-tech spin-off companies come out of all the work that we are investing in. And then the partnerships is about how we maintain that. Now, back to the question at hand. One of the questions we ask is, what do African researchers tell us as an organization that needs to be fixed in the entire grant making and funding context? There are many things I have heard. For example, they would say, leadership, we need reform in grant making. There's a traditional angle to that, but we need to reform that. They tell us that they need us to be more ambitious, riskier, and we fund creative research. That's great. We invest in more institutions. That's a must, we do that. These are the places where R&D happens. We build science leaders, we move away from short-term projects. I hear about this all the time. And again, this is an area that really needs to be addressed. It is annoying for a partner to come to the table and give a grant to you, and it's for 1 year or 2 years, and then they start asking you about impact. What impact can you make in 2 years or 18 months? And I think this is a conversation that we all need to also have, thinking more longer term about how we approach this. I think Professor Lumumba has always mentioned this aspect around government funding, other sources. For us, we have been lucky to be able to work with many governments, and we can see what governments are contributing, even though they have not reached that step where we can say 1 or 2% is coming out of this. This week I just received, for example, a letter from government of Rwanda. They want to put $1 million into a project. Can we co-fund something with them? Co-funding is critical. And if you can match $1 to every donor, wherever it is coming from, that would unlock more funding from our government. But we need to make that case very, very much so, because we need to make a stronger value proposition. One of the mistakes we see is when we go looking for money, we go to the wrong departments of government. With all due respect to Ministry of Health, that's not where the money is for R&D. The people who make decisions are in the budget offices and in planning offices and the economic offices, because that's where you can argue there is value for money in investing in R&D. So what structural reform do we mean, very briefly? I think many funders, we collect data, gender, geography, discipline, but there has to be an appreciation that that data alone does not shift power that we are seeking for the continent. The structural reforms, they require that we think about addressing bias. There is bias embedded in decision-making systems. And part of the reason is we're still reliant on what you might call Western-centric excellence benchmarks. So we haven't thought through about what are the benchmarks and the metrics ourselves we should use in our own context. So we are having then a weighting heavy of institutional reputation. I mean, it means we are always relying on what, again, you might call them the usual suspects who attract all the money in Africa. We have thousands of institutions in Africa and universities, but only a few seems to have gotten it right to do this. Some of it is historically disadvantaged organizations. With all due respect to those of you who may come from South Africa, yes, we talk about all the top 7 in South Africa, but what about the 40 historically disadvantaged universities in South Africa? They are no better than all the others that we have in Africa, thousands of them, because they're in the same trap of not getting recognition or support. And then we need to think about the people you send to your grants, how they review that. The review is dominated by people who come from privileged networks. And again, structural thing we need to fix. Now, the other question is, what are the opportunities we could all support and adopt? One is long-term funding. I won't go into that because I've mentioned that for that. We need to, but it's just to be very focused on that long-term, whether it's coming to government, adaptable but predictable funding it requires. We need research for building capacities, for leadership development, for institutions. Now, this enables organizations to plan, to support the talent they require. Here in icipe has been known for this APIS program for many, many years about talent, and the question around sustainability. Now, we need also to target funding for this mentioned historical imbalances. So we need to look again at how we are supporting early career researchers in those universities, underfunded regions or institutions, support women-led consortia. For the last 10 years I've been in this business, I've been looking at the data of number of applications we receive from women when we put out requests for proposals. I have not seen that going above 30%. 30% means that we are nowhere to get that aspect around, whether it is gender parity or equity. We have some way to go in terms of focusing on women and their contribution and their place and how their leadership is being left behind. And that's something that I think all of us should be very intentional as we approach this. And we are doing that with our own programs to do that. Now, the aspect around co-creation, because you mentioned that, I think this is a pathway to shifting power when we think about co-creation. And again, co-creation definition by who is very, very important. Now, we have to focus on co-created programs where researchers, communities, and institutions participate. So if we're talking with icipe, we are talking with all the other institutions here, then we'll be co-creating because we all understand where we are coming from. That way, co-creation can contribute or establish trust, ensure relevance, it distribute that decision-making authority. The question, again, that keeps coming up is how do we look at the culture of equity? There is bias in the whole system about grant making across the entire funding chain. So that requires structural changes in the culture itself of how we do grant making. It requires transparent criteria, clear communications, and how consistent application of rules are, rather than changing the rules along the way. We need equity advisory boards in organizations that are seeking funding. We need how we monitor those awards, how we prevent bias, how we publish dashboards. Dashboard is, if somebody is looking at Science for Africa Foundation, are you able to see all the information about where we are supporting, who we are supporting, what areas of discipline? We need that information. That should be public information. And that requires policies and practices policies and redesign peer review, drawing wider geographies, career stages, and reviewing training. We need data, and technology can help us to do all of this. That would help us how we make decisions, how we joint review panels are critical for the work we do. But one of the things we see is that can help us to bring north, south, but more importantly, to bring intra-African collaboration. So the last thing I would say then, we believe good science comes from anywhere. So we feel as an organization and collectively as partners that we actually have a moral imperative to fill those structural gaps that we can support R&D across the continent. It's a moral imperative for us because great science, and very briefly, one of the things I've been so excited is to have a grant going to a place, Eritrea. I think some people might struggle even where that is in our map of Africa, but there's some great work that is being done in Eritrea. So the person we provided support there was the first person in Eritrea to do genomics work in that country on Eritrean population. That is great. That's the kind of things I celebrate. Sudan is in a mess because of conflict. But there were 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 biospecimens that were generated by some great scientists, but of course they could not do the work. We are a unique funder because we can then say, move those biospecimens out of Sudan. We will establish a place in Ethiopia where that work can be done. And the last thing I would give an example. Right now, I have a team in Mali. And most of us, those of you who actually get information from BBC or CNN, with all due respect to them, great job they do, all you hear about Mali is the crisis in Mali, or Abdul, the crisis in Burkina Faso, or the crisis in the Sahel region. That's all we get to hear. But their Center of Excellence, one of the best molecular sequencing center in Mali, led by Professor Jimde, is state of the art in Bamako. So these are the exciting things about what we are doing, but I finished by going to what Professor Lumumba said. Sustainability comes from government stepping up, and in a big time, they must step up.